27th. We are expecting a couple of members to join us online. And hopefully that will happen in the next few minutes, but we do have quorum, so we'll begin. I'll start with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that this land in which the Sarnia Police Service operates is part of the ancestral land of the Chippewa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations, referred to collectively as the Anishinaabe. It is through the connection of the Anishinaabe with the spirit of the land, water, and air that we recognize their unique cultures, traditions, and values. Together as treaty people, we have a shared responsibility to act with respect to the environment that sustains all life, protecting the future for those generations to come. I'll ask if there's any declarations of conflict of interest. Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting. Board Member McRoberts moves and Board Member Ash seconds. All those in favor? That's approved. And then looking for a motion to approve the minutes of the February 27th meeting. Board Member Ash moves and Board Member McRoberts seconds. Any questions or comments on those minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's approved as well. That brings us to item number 6 on the agenda, our monthly operation update.
All right, good morning. Start off with our heat map again, and you've seen it in the previous board meetings. So this one, you'll note that we're starting to see a lack of concentration or a movement, a shift from our south end to the north end. So if you compare the previous heat map to this heat map, you'll notice that we're seeing now more of an increased concentration in and around the hospital and around the Laurel Lee community. So that's consistent with what we're seeing at the shelter and the vacation of Greenwood. So I can tell you that during this time frame, we are we have 2,595 occurrences for the month of February, and of those, 154 were from wanted persons, 129 were warrants, 106 for intimate partner violence, and 76 were for well-being checks. We have charges are up 77% over February of last year at 1,013, and we're seeing a slight decline in arrests. They're down 7%. But I believe that's because we're laying more charges, so we're essentially doing the same amount of work, just we're not seeing the volume of as many people, but there's still a lot of hard work.
The number of incidents related to intimate partner violence seems high to me. Is there a change in that?
So what we're from, so when you see intimate partner violence, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a crime. It could have been just a report of intimate partner situation where there's no criminal offense. So I think because we're doing a better job in communicating, we're partnering with our the shelters, center, the interval house. So we're doing more to get the message out. So I think we're getting more people reporting domestic or intimate partner situations. We're not necessarily charging.
Still, that's just 1 month, right?
That is, yes.
Okay.
I'll continue on. There's a couple honored guests here today, and I want to highlight some of the exceptional work that they did, and that's one of our MHART teams. I'll introduce them after I read the summary of the work that they're being recognized today for. So it was on January 21st of this year that the Mental Health Engagement Response Team, known as MHART here at the Sarnia Police Service, in collaboration with the Canadian Mental Health Association, conducted a follow-up with a vulnerable young woman who had recently arrived in Sarnia under concerning circumstances. Through investigative efforts, MHART determined that the individual was actually from Long Lac and had some developmental delays and a history of victimization, including past sexual assaults. She had been in the care of a child protection services in Thunder Bay before meeting a male individual online, misrepresented his age, and persuaded her to travel to Sarnia. During the follow-up conducted by MHART, they identified several red flags, including potential human trafficking concerns. While there were no immediate grounds for apprehension, the team took proactive steps by contacting child protection services and family members, both of whom strongly recommended that she return to Thunder Bay, where support systems were in place. The team worked to secure resources, including a replacement phone, to restore her communication with the family, and ensure that she was aware of all available transportation assistance. The following day, they coordinated with victim services, and a call was received indicating that the male individual wanted her removed from the residence. Uniformed patrol was dispatched to bring her safely to the station. MHART Victim Services attempted to engage with her. She was initially withdrawn and overwhelmed, but she later opened up, building trust with the officer, revealing incidents of domestic violence. The crucial disclosure led to charges being processed, and the suspect was arrested and held for bail. Victim Services immediately secured emergency lodging for her and maintained continuous contact, providing food, communication support, coordinating with the OPP to ensure her safety. Given the risk of her reconnecting with the accused, we prioritized her protection. Victim Services arranged for her safe transport to Toronto, where then the Child Protection Services took over and ensured her return home to Thunder Bay. Follow-up was confirmed of her safe arrival. This case highlights the outstanding collaboration between the Sarnia Police MHART team, Victim Services, and Uniformed Patrol. The swift and compassionate actions of all involved played a crucial role in safeguarding a vulnerable individual and preventing further victimization. So today I've invited Constable Bert Sparling and the social worker Bianca Sapone to join us today, just to be recognized for the amount of work that went over and above a typical call for service, but for them, this is a typical call and a typical response. So the MHART is just paying dividends immensely here with the Sarnia Police Service. It's a valued part of our team. The patrol officers thoroughly appreciate their presence and being able to handle calls and to provide the follow-up and the empathy that's required. We have two teams here. They work in collaboration with each other, Constable Greg Armstrong and social worker Nikki. They'll work kind of an opposite schedule to ensure that we have continuous coverage. So I just wanted to recognize them today for the outstanding work that they did on that call.
Thank you for your fine work, and I'm sure for the woman that was involved, this is life-changing for her and one of many people that you were helping. So that's wonderful. Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
Through the chair, have we heard defense? Is she still safe? Is she still in Thunder Bay?
I looked up, there's been no new occurrences in Thunder Bay.
Excellent.
But I haven't had any. I just made one phone call. They said that she rides safe with the family.
Thank you. To carry on, the next couple of occurrences that I'd like to highlight just demonstrate the amount and prevalence of weapons within our community. And the first one involves a 16-year-old who was arrested and charged with a number of offenses. And during that arrest of that individual, 2 firearms were seized. So this just highlights the fact that people arming themselves isn't reserved for adults. A 16-year-old is quite concerning who has access to this type of weaponry, as well as feels comfortable to carry it around in their daily movements throughout our city. The next incident that I'd like to highlight, which is going to draw a little bit of attention to our special guest presenter a little bit later, is a couple of occurrences that Constable Sean Irvin was involved in. One of which resulted in the seizure of a plethora of stolen property out of a U-Haul truck. And what's interesting about that is that Sean was actually the officer who was conducting patrol that day and was assisting in the traffic stop. And unbeknownst to the person who decided to run from the vehicle, Sean and Vader were on scene there and were able to quickly apprehend the individual, which resulted in the recovery of tens of thousands of dollars worth of stolen property. Led to some drug charges as well. The next event to highlight, once again, highlights the work by Constable Urban and Vader, and that was a break and enter to a compound in the south end. I've been involved in a lot of these in the past, and the cover of darkness is glorious for, well, it used to be glorious for people up to nefarious activities where they could just kind of dissolve into the shadows. And the officers would have a very difficult time locating them. And this is one of those incidents where the person fled upon the police arrival. Our flashlights are very limiting because they the light stops essentially in front of your face when it first comes into contact with any kind of grass or trees or anything like that. Sean and Vader were called out, and within minutes, Vader got on the track and tracked that person into the wooded area where he was trying to hide from us, and was taken into custody. The next incident that I'd like to talk about is a cyclist who was arrested, and during the course of the arrest became combative with the officer. And I wanted to highlight this one because it kind of dovetails into the use of force report, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. But the prevalence, again, of weapons on individuals is extremely high. In the photo that's attached to this one, you can see it turned out to be a replica firearm, but if anybody's looking at that who has experience with guns, they would never be able to tell that that's a replica. And during the struggle that the officer had with this individual, this is what fell out of his possession. As well as you can see that there's some knives in there as well. And so this individual was taken into custody without using force. So as we're going to talk a little bit about what force is, and it's using weapons on an individual or using as much force that would require medical attention. And this individual was brought into custody fighting with the officer, armed with a number of weapons. And by the definition of it, force was not used. Should I stand corrected? It tried to deploy the taser on him, but it's a less lethal force option when we could have used potentially lethal force in that. And then the final thing to highlight is that Rainbow Park was fully vacated in the month of February. This was done through outstanding work by our impact team in conjunction with the city bylaw and the other stakeholders involved in that. The impact team needs a ton of recognition for this because their constant and persistent presence within there, offering the resources to the people who were unhoused, connecting them with family members, connecting them with resources, taking them to the shelters. There's been stories in the past that we have highlighted where we have ensured that people are getting connected as far away as Niagara Falls into the Northern Ontario to ensure that they get somewhere that is a viable housing option for them. So I imagine that this will be, the chief may want to elaborate a little bit just on this. Rainbow is closed. So that was a long-standing issue within our community, and our impact team did an exceptional job there to bring that to a very, very successful conclusion. No arrests, exceptional. And then the very last thing there that we put out on our Facebook was that the Sarnia Police Association hockey team are champions again. Long time coming, but members of the police service, accompanied by one officer from the US, who has played with us for a number of years, attended to Durham, participated in the hockey tournament where thousands of police officers come together every year. It's just a great and fun event. So, subject to any questions, that is the monthly operational update for February.
Chief, did you want to add on the Rainbow Park?
I think Deputy Vance Full covered all the important points there.
Okay. So just acknowledge that we have board members Gillis and Sebastian online as well. So welcome. And any questions from the board? Comments on the report? Okay, seeing none, thank you. And we'll move on to the 2024 financial report. So
good morning. So for 2024, we've kind of split up the report into 4 parts: operating budget, reserves and capital, and then a little focus on the police board operating budget, and then the police board discretionary fund. So first of all, for the police operating budget itself, we're reporting I'd say a small surplus of about $90,000. It represents a very small percentage of the overall, but with a lot of challenges and with a lot of variations within the accounts, that was a good result to achieve. One item of note in there is overtime. Officer overtime is at the lowest point in more than 20 years. So those costs have been really controlled. Then on to capital and reserves. We just have a comparison of what our plan was at the beginning of the year with what the actual expenditures were and the actual results. Overall, like at the end again, a fairly small difference, but a lot of variation within the accounts. Of note, this is where the city council cut was impacted and where we see that we didn't really have sufficient funds to cover the vehicle purchases. So that reserve shows a small negative balance at the end of the year. And then moving from there to the police services board budget. Some of the legal fees that are shown in there are probably will in the future be moved to the police service side so that the board legal fees are reflected and you'll see less variation there. And then the last thing is the discretionary fund, which is earning interest every month, which is mostly offsetting the expenditures for the year. That's all
Okay. So I know I have a few questions, but I'll let the board members go first. So board member Ash.
Through the chair, Kathy. So the county grant, we budgeted 1.5 million. We received a little under 1 million. Do we know why there's a $500,000 in the difference, considering the expenses that we incurred because of decisions made by the county this year?
The county grants relate to covering the cost of court security.
Oh,
It could be just a reporting difference in terms of that they may report the expense in this year. So yeah, I don't have a lot more to offer on that, just that that's an ongoing discussion that we'll be having with them in regards to all of the services we provide at the court and how they are to fund that.
thank you.
Board member
Thank you.
The lowest number of hours for overtime, is that just because of the structure and adding a few officers, or that there was no major case that lasted weeks, or what can we attribute this to?
So there's a number of variables. I'd love to say it was, wonderful leadership that produced this result. There are a number of factors that I can say that we've certainly introduced some accountability with the overtime. Like overtime is a necessary tool. We will always have overtime at some point to deal with staffing issues or critical incidents that arise. I can say that right from our sergeant level up, there's been a lot of care with how we deploy the overtime resources. So I think there's a number of factors. Some of it may be just less demand on the road. We have more people available to cover some things through some staffing deployments, but I do think a lot of it comes from our middle management team being very diligent with how they use those resources.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight the overtime as well, and really congratulate you, Chief, and the team. This past year is almost half of what it was, over the last few years, and yes, you can't predict what kind of a year you're going to have. I understand that, but I think you've had employed a number of internal controls to really to manage overtime, and I think the level of analytics that you're using also allows you to deploy resources efficiently. So that this is really good news. So wanted to highlight that. I wanted to ask the other thing I wanted to highlight, and I know it's in the report, but I think it's worth mentioning, is the issue with funding our reserves. And I just want to note for the record that the fact that there was a historical practice to hand back surplus funds to the city, $2.5 million over 10 years, is something that we continue to deal with in terms of a legacy issue to this day. So just wanted to put that on the record. What I wanted to ask was, The paragraph on the bottom of page 22, for 2026 consideration is recommended that the board consider distinguishing operational reserves from true reserve accounts. Which ones would we consider to be operational and which one would we consider to be true reserves?
The equipment reserves would be operational because we use those reserves to just to even out the year-to-year operating budget. So we may purchase more equipment in one year than another. If you kept that all, reported that all as operating, you would see big variations, and that would raise just, it just wouldn't, it would just be, raise more confusion.
So the building replacement would be more of a, would be less operational then.
Well, yes, by dint of it being a building replacement reserve, it should be a true capital reserve.
I see board member Sebastian has a question, comment. So go ahead, board member Sebastian.
Thank you. So just kind of highlighting a little bit about the unpredictability of labor and respecting that, the majority of the increases are around things that I would consider predictable. So things like equipment leasing, license renewal, vehicle maintenance, etc. I know that we've had some conversations before about strengthening the maturity of our budgeting process. Can I understand a little bit about the steps that are being taken this year as we head into budget timing in order to kind of minimize some of the uncertainty in that area? And again, I do want to emphasize we are in a year of great economic uncertainty. And the sentiment I know from the community will be that we really look for areas to either kind of stay the line or do more with less. So I want to put that out there as well.
Through the chair, just a couple of just general comments. So in poor economic times, demand on policing tends to go up. We are an emergency service. We don't control the inflow of crime in that sense. Like we're not able to control the supply or the demand, I should say. Also, because we're an emergency service, we predict as best we can based on trends, but we can't always with great certainty know. For example, we could have a brand new cruiser and then it could be involved in some sort of a pursuit or an accident and it's written off. That wouldn't go through the cycle. So just to back up a little bit, I think some of the labeling that we use in our budget cycle, we use the word reserve, but it's not actually reserve. It's a bucket of money where every year it goes in, and then we use that at varying levels year over year to go out. But what it allows us to do is level the annual contribution to that particular fund. So the equipment reserve is used for the boilers, for example. We had two $75,000 boilers. That isn't something we could have predicted. We have to have that money on hand to be able to meet those needs and the ebbs and flows of those particular things. I think the board's aware the cost of equipment has gone up dramatically in the last little while. The cost of vehicles, the cost of equipping those vehicles, technology requirements. In terms of licensing fees, we often wait for our renewals. Anyone that, large corporations that control email and accounting software and those types of costs are simply outside of our control. We usually just wait for the quote to come in and we're stuck with it, as most businesses are. In terms of when we say the true reserve, back to the chair's original question about this paragraph, what we're saying and recommending certainly to the board is that we identify a true reserve, a piggy bank, a savings account, where capital money is set aside and not accessed unless approved or required as a true reserve. So we're using the term reserve in our day-to-day budgeting, but they're pulled, those accounts are pulled from all the time. All that's done is the dollar cost average, the annual contribution, and then we have the ebbs and flows annually that are on the output of those accounts, but they're not true savings accounts or reserves. And I'll say that was I had misidentified those when I first got here because I assumed it was like a savings account. So it's something I've learned along the way, and Kathy's helped educate in some of the practices that we've done there. So we are happy to look forward over time. I just want the board to be aware that policing can be unpredictable, and even things like CSP legislative changes, we could never have predicted those beyond like even a 6-month window. Really was when we ultimately learned what some of those impacts would be. So just for consideration, it does get tricky, but we'll certainly it's a great recommendation, and we'll look to do that as best we can.
Thank you. Board Member Sebastian, did you have a supplementary?
Yeah, and I appreciate the risk and the warning, but what I'm really looking for is the specifics on how we're going to be proactive around those operational costs. We understand that reserves are there for a reason. We should have a fairly detailed capital plan. We have some anchors in the budget for those things, but we lack the specificity on looking up and saying, okay, where are all of our equipment leases? Who are we licensing hardware from? What is the COLA for SaaS this year, right? That's all available. Having those proactive conversations with our partners in order to be able to predict that. Now that we've got 2 deputies in place, we've got a much more mature budget process. I'm looking for the specificity on how we're going to tackle budget this year and try to unlock some of that, fully respecting that there are unpredictable elements. But again, want to hear a little bit more detail. Can we maybe have that as an update for our next meeting?
So I think we will be starting I think the service is probably starting the budgetary process now for 2026. But as a board, last year we had our first budget workshop in June. And so I anticipate we'll probably do something similar. And then I think your comments are appreciated, Board Member Sebastian. I think that will be an opportunity to really start to take a look at that, our process. I think as I look at my history, my personal history on the board, I think where we have been, let's say 5 years ago to where we are now, the process continues to mature, and we'll just continue to work together to come up with a process that will meet those needs that you identified. So does that? I don't know if something can be prepared in terms of the next meeting. That might be premature, but I defer to the chief or to Kathy to comment on that.
I think this would be a great part of the budget. It's the board's budget. It is the board's budget. So we would certainly take direction from the board in that regard. I don't know what we would be able to provide you in advance at the next meeting. Certainly, we'd be open to any of those conversations as part of the budget process.
I had 2 other questions, fairly simple, I think. At the top of page 22, it talked about 5 financial reserve accounts. I think we have 5, but on the following page, I saw 4. So I wondered if, are we missing one, or?
The police discretionary reserve is the 5th one,
Okay.
and it's reported a little bit later.
Perfect. And then this is getting a little, this is minor, but there was a footnote, number 20, associated with vehicle replacement. I don't think it made it on the bottom of the sheet. I just wondered what the footnote was referring to. And if I'm putting you on the spot, we can come back to it.
Yeah, that's
But-
funny that it dropped off. It would have referred to the funding for vehicle equipment. The funding was insufficient for the year due to the budget cut that was sustained at the municipal level.
Right.
We
So
sustained a $475,000 budget cut. Instead of applying it to operations, it was applied to reserves.
yeah, so I see we spent just over $1 million, and we had budgeted 500,000, and am I correct in thinking that each vehicle is about 100,000? Is that
Yeah, over 100,000.
over 100,000? Okay, I'll just look to the board if there's any other questions or comments about the 2024 report. It's nice to see that that we did at least ensure that we were in the black in the end, so appreciate the work that you've done to really manage costs. Let's move on to item number 8 on the agenda. So this is a motion related to CSPA funding that was initiated by Board Member McRoberts, and I know Board Member Sebastian also worked with her on that. So I'll turn it over to Board Member McRoberts for any comments.
Just the point was, we were asking where the money's gonna come for all of the implementation that you're supposed to, all the municipality and the police board, we're supposed to fund ourselves, and that's where we're supposed to come up with the money. And we asked the question and we were told there is no money, but they continue to add to the list. So we were lucky enough to have Board Member Sebastian, with her experience, be able to create something, and our chair reached out to thank you. And we're deciding where that's gonna go best. Sarnia has to put their foot out and say, we're not gonna stop, hard stop, like what's gonna happen, send us some money and justify that. OPP gets whatever they get and municipalities are kind of stuck with less. So I think it was a brilliant motion, and hopefully other cities and municipalities and whatnot will join in this. There has to be money for giving out grants, so why not just help fund the requirements?
Yes, and I think so the legislation was approved in 2019. It was enacted in 2024, and then there's been associated regulations that have been implemented. And as the chief mentioned, you know, trying to foresee the costs associated with the implementation was difficult to budget, and there was no additional funding for it. So, Board Member Sebastian, did you want to add to the commentary?
Yeah, actually, Paul, I have a question. It's kind of tied in, not directly to the next step. But what I'm curious about, and I don't know if anyone can help decipher if this is the right venue to help decipher the email that we got yesterday regarding the Community Safety and Policing Grant Program. The preamble in the cover email to Derek and Kathy, etc., it positions itself to be very positive, as if they're opening up new things to cover more operational and capital expenses than they have. Is that a reality? Because that kind of ties in, and I want to be able to be prepared if that's the response, to say, well, we've increased our communities policing grant. Can someone kind of decipher what the real deal is with that email?
Yeah, so we received the email, I think, 1 or 2 days ago, and I think there is an answer, and I'll turn it over to the chief or Kathy to respond.
The grant that was referred to in the email is a continuation of a grant that has just, the 3-year term has just expired. So there's no new grant monies. These monies were accounted for in the budget. So they are just asking us to go through the application process again to get the same money for the following year.
Okay, so it's not really anything incremental. They indicate there's 16 million available in total. I don't know if that's an increase from last year or not. So it doesn't sound like, even though it's positioned to be positive, it's not really going to make an incremental difference in our funding.
Correct. It's the same
hearing?
announcement
Okay.
made 3 years ago.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so then, Board Member Gillis.
On mute.
Sorry, Board Member Gillis, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm still on I'm on Calgary time. It's dark here. Anyway, coming back to the community grant. Have they taken into account the cost of living in those grants?
The specific grant that was announced is the exact same amount that we've been receiving for the past 3 years, right to the penny. We will be applying for there's kind of 2 streams of the grant. We'll be applying for the other one. we'll see when our application is approved, whether it's close to what we've received now. It's probably a dynamic process, but we don't know until we receive the approval.
Follow up then? When you go to the OAPSB conference in June, could you raise this issue on the floor when all the other municipal police boards are there? Because cost of living, if they don't factor it in, we're actually losing money. So it's something that I think needs to come to their attention. So I'm sure the other police services boards are talking about it, but if we have a united front, we might be able to change that. So it's a constant cost of living incorporated into the grant process.
Board Member Gillis, I know I will be attending the AGM, and if there's an opportunity, I don't know whether you can raise issues from the floor, but if there is that option, I will certainly do that. And as part of our general advocacy efforts at the conference, we'll be talking to other police service boards and to ministry personnel about the issue. So thank you for that. That's an important point that it sounds good to continue funding, but if it's the same rate of funding and doesn't include inflation, then it's actually decreased funding.
That's right.
So, Chief.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I can say that the grant funding topic is a very prominent priority at the chiefs of police level. The OACP has it listed as one of their key issues that they're trying to tackle for this year, and in particular, equitable funding for small and medium services.
All right, so
That doesn't include the cost of living.
These grants
Yeah, and
are.
just sorry.
Go ahead, Board Member Sebastian.
Sorry, just to point out as well, cost of living doesn't necessarily factor in kind of B2B elements that we rely on from an operations standpoint. So there are separate price indexes for things like software. That has increased anywhere from 8.6 to 20% annually, which far outpaces the cost of living, which impacts for sure our wages, where we've seen some of the biggest increase. So it's definitely absolutely something to ask, especially if that grant has remained stagnant. And incremental to that is the much higher rate of increase on cost of equipment, software, and so on.
Okay, thank you for that. So the motion is to, it's a lengthy motion, it's in the package, but essentially it's to approve the submission of a letter to the Solicitor General requesting additional funding from the government to meet unbudgeted and additional costs related to implementation of the CSPA. So I'll look to, we'll get it on the floor and then I'll ask for any further comments or questions. Board Member McRoberts, are you prepared to make that motion?
I am.
And then Board Member Sebastian, are you willing to second that motion?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll just ask Board Member Amish.
Through the chair, would this not, I agree it has to go to the Solicitor General, but should we not send this out to other police boards and municipal governments to try to garner support behind this instead of just coming from us? Like, should we not get the city to back us on this to support this as well as other police boards? Is it worth sending it out to the rest?
So there was a recommendation initially that the OAPSB be copied on the letter. So I think we certainly could do that, and we could copy City Council as well. Do you think that's appropriate?
How about all Ontario, all municipalities and police?
That would be my suggestion.
Okay, so so we'll take that as the friendly amendment, so to speak, to the motion. We'll copy municipal police forces in the province of Ontario, OAPSB, and also City Council. So with that in mind, any other comments or questions about the motion? Okay, then I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Okay. That's approved. And the hands that I see online, I assume are voting in favor of the motion. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll get that out this week. All right, and that brings us to a couple of annual mandatory annual reports, and we'll start with the collection of identifying information report.
Okay, so with the review of intercarding and street checks done by Justice Tulloch, the government implemented Ontario Regulation 5816 January of 2017. That regulation requires us police to document and report on the number of times that they've attempted to collect certain personal identification or identifiers of individuals. So for the period of January 1st to December 31st of 2024, the Sarnia Police reported 0 instances. So we did not attempt to collect personal identification or personal identifiers from individuals outside of what we're lawfully allowed to do. So I can tell you that we have none to report, and that's consistent with last year. So we're not doing street checks, we're not doing carding. The regulations also require that our officers receive training every 36 months. So we are compliant with that. Every new member that's brought on receives training when they're onboarded, and every member who's received the training every 36 months, they get updated for fresh training through our OPTVA, which is our CPKM, which is our online training. You'll see from the report all the different categories that we have to report on, all the metrics, and again, there are zeros all across the board. But this legislation doesn't hinder us from doing that.
Yeah, so I saw a lot of zeros, which I think is probably where we'd like it to be, right? So, okay, any questions or comments on the report? Board? Okay, and as noted in the report, that's one of those reports that will be posted on the website for the public as well. And that brings us to the use of force report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've prepared and submitted the annual use of force report requirement for the calendar year of 2024. Subject to any questions, some things that I'd like to highlight in this is how very few incidents are actually the police are using force in our interactions with the community. We responded to close to 35,000 calls for service last year, which public interactions far exceeds that. And we only had 67 incidents where we used force by the definition on the individuals. That equates to less than 0.2% of the time that we interact with people, we are actually using force. Some commentary that's surfaced recently is that given the fact that we don't use force very often, that maybe we're investing too much in our training with that, but the complete opposite is true. It's because of the amount of training that we invest that the officers who are out there interacting with the public and coming into situations where their lives could potentially be in danger, the confidence and competence that they display enables them to use a level of force that is appropriate for the interaction with those individuals. So I'm very happy to report that there were no special investigations units investigations as a result of our force. So that would be a serious injury or the use of a firearm on a person. As well that there were only 2 reported injuries, and of those, it just required observation at the hospital, one of which was a behavior as opposed to an injury, that they were admitted to hospital, and the other was a treated and released with what we would say no injuries. However, it fits the definition of what an injury is. Again, I'll just stress the amount of training that we go through, both from the use of the tools that we have available to us, as well as all of the racism, the discrimination, the diversity and community inclusion training that all officers are that they take in order to address the issues that arise through the nature of this report. So subject to any questions, those are my highlights.
Okay, thank you. Looking to the board for questions or comments.
I do.
Board member Ash, yeah.
Through the chair. So you commented on the rhetoric that we've heard, and we've seen it on social media that, you know, that our officers aren't using their guns, they don't really need the training. Obviously, that's a completely backward statement to say, because the last thing we need is our officers on the streets with weapons with no training. The fact that they don't necessarily use their firearms on a regular basis is a good thing, in my opinion, but they still need to have that training. So not only is it completely irresponsible for those comments to be made in regards to our officers and the training, the amount of time and money put into their training, it's also part of our compliance. We have to do that. It's not just something that we've pulled out of the air and decided to do. We have to comply with the act. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I'm glad to see that this is the outcome. Like, and I think it comes down to the training that they're provided and their de-escalation training, and it encompasses so much that this is what we need.
Thank you.
Good job.
Mr. Chair, if I could just comment on that. I appreciate you bringing up the de-escalation part of that, because that is a very integral part, and there's certainly been an increase in the amount of training that our officers and officers across the province are seeing with respect to that. That is the primary focus of our defensive tactics training, is to de-escalate the situation such that force isn't required. But unfortunately, in certain situations it is. And if I could just make an anecdotal comment about the training and the firearms aspect of it is, I have good friends who work for the Windsor Police Service, and in 2007, unfortunately, they had an officer killed by the name of John Atkinson. And what came from that was, through the investigation, was the accused in that matter trained. They went to his training ground, and when questioned by the police, that offender said that he trains on his firearm every day for this event because he expects that the police are training every single day. And unfortunately, John Atkinson lost his life to somebody who wasn't prepared for the police. We have legislative requirements for training that we meet. I would openly say that they're not adequate. So we try to exceed those standards to ensure that our officers are prepared for any situation that they have. We had an officer who was stabbed last year, and we responded appropriately. And that's the stuff that we face. So we need to be prepared every single time that we go out for that type of situation. So we ensure that our training is adequate and that our officers are prepared with the tools and the training required.
Thank you. Board Member Gillis, and then Board Member McRoberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I would echo the Deputy Chief's comments. If anything, we don't need less training, we need more training. People don't see the value of it because it's an intangible thing. But speaking directly to the de-escalation techniques that you have to learn how to do that. It doesn't come automatically. It's not a part of our psychic to do. Part of our psychic is to the fight and flight mechanism, and to change that mindset is incredibly difficult. So just looking at the progress that you made with the training that you had, I think we need to applaud that. And there will always be people who will always say, you know, we're doing things wrong. But when they're in that situation, I would expect that they would be very glad that you had, if they were in that situation, that you had that training. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. And Board Member McRoberts.
I'm just confirming, if Vader goes out, that will fall under this. Should he get a little chompy chomp, or what if he grabbed clothing and threw someone to the ground and they got a concussion or something, that would also fall under it. Yeah. I'm kind of looking forward to that. Just saying.
He is outside.
All right. Any other questions or comments about the report? I see none. That segues nicely into the presentation on the K9 unit. So we'll proceed with that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. An officer who needs no introduction, Constable Sean Irby. we thought that this was a great time for Sean to come back to the board and to do a presentation about the canine unit. It was almost a year ago to the day where we were, well, I wasn't here, so, but we were all together with the introduction of our beast dog unit. So I've asked Sean to come today to do a presentation about what the capabilities of the dog are now that we are a year in, that he's been handling Vader for that amount of time, and he has a complete understanding. Last year, when we talked about this stuff, it was the expectations of what we thought it was going to be able to do and hoped and everything. And I would suggest that it far exceeds anything that what we expected it to be. So Sean will just do a presentation about the capabilities of the dog, highlight a bunch of situations where he's seen some success and maybe some challenges that he faces along the way.
Thanks, Deputy. Morning, everybody. So like the deputy said, we got Vader 11 months ago. And he's changed drastically since the first day we got him. So on the left there is Vader at 57 pounds. He's allegedly 15 months, but we believe he's actually younger. And then him and I went on the canine handler course for 16 months, and he came back in August, 70 pounds, and you could just tell he's a different dog. This is Vader today. It doesn't even look like the same guy we had. So Vader and I have been operational for just over 7 months. And during that time, we've responded to 71 canine specific deployments. That's officers saying we need the dog here. That doesn't include my regular days, backing up the operations division, traffic stops, arrest warrants, those kind of things. Those are specific Vader calls. Right now, I'm working a 40-hour week. I work 4 10-hour shifts, days and nights, weekends, weekdays. And during those 71 canine deployments, it's almost 50-50. 50 of them I was at work at the time, and 50% of the time I was at home and got called in. As you can see, there's been 49 arrests with Vader being involved, and that's not Vader tracking suspects down, but that's Vader involved where our emergency response teams doing warrant, our MCAT units arresting people on the street. Vader's in the area, he's there, he's barking, he acts as a deterrent. If someone wants to run and they hear Vader barking, they second guess their speed because it's going to happen. There was one call where Vader was searching a wooded area for a guy who hit someone else with a golf club. And as we were walking through the woods, he heard the dog coming. He gave himself up. Right? Vader's great. So like I said, I worked 4 10-hour shifts, and my deployments have been 50-50. 50% called in, 50% I was already. I'm available 24/7. I haven't really had a day off, to be honest with you. Even on a day off, I could be called out of thin air and come into work. I train Vader every single day. So if you have your dog and you exercise him by walking around the block, Vader has to be exercised through tasks. If I take him to Canterra and just walk him, he's going to think that when we're going to look for a suspect in a break and enter, he's just out for a walk. So everything I do with Vader is a task. So even on my day off and Vader's day off, we still do things. What Vader's been doing, he's been tracking suspects for missing people. He's been doing a lot of building searches, area searches, vehicle searches. And I've also gone to schools and showed the kids what Vader can do and explain to them how he operates. One thing Vader has done over the past 7 months is he's gained the respect of our officers. I can think of one sergeant in particular that the first time he was around when Vader did a building search, he was frozen because he didn't know what Vader was gonna do. And now he's more relaxed and he knows that Vader's not gonna fight him, Vader's looking for somebody else. I was deployed 71 times the last 7 months, and that's the months including December, January, February. We had a very long winter this year. Historically, policing is slower during that time. It's only going to escalate from here. Already, once the snow melted, my calls went a lot. I had more calls in the first 3 weeks of March than December, January, February. So I'm expecting that to increase as well. And like I said, he's gained the officer's trust. It's so much easier to send Vader into a building to search instead of an officer looking around the corner, wondering what's in the darkness. When Vader's already gone through, they're a lot more at ease and they know someone's there because Vader's already cleared it. The other thing with Vader is, for example, we were getting break-ins to St. Peter's School on Oxford Street. It's a huge building. Vader clears that in 10 minutes, where it would normally take 6 officers, half an hour, 45 minutes to clear that entire building. So he's being used with it. This is just a video. This is what Vader can do. So this isn't Vader, but it's one of the Windsor dogs. If you were an officer and you looked in a room, you'd say, this room is clear, there's nobody in it. But the difference with the dog is that the dog searches with and this is what Vader's trained to do. When he finds someone in the closet or in the bed, go back. Alerting the officer that there's somebody there. And there's that. So one of the things Vader does when an emergency response team executes warrants, they go in, they detain and arrest everybody, and then Vader goes in and makes sure he clears all the nooks and crannies of the house, because people have been found after the warrant's been executed and they've been hiding or anything else. So it's just a secondary precaution to make sure that the building is clear and it's safe for the officers to go inside. This is Vader searching for evidence. So Vader's trained to smell. If he gets anything like a firearm or anything with human odor, he lays down and he puts the other between his paws. So there's just a couple of spent casings, and it would take officers hours to find that in the grass, and he finds it in seconds. But that's what he's trained to do. Something as small as just bullet casings. Like I said, Vader's goes into every drug warrant that our MCAT unit executes, and Vader's trained on crack, cocaine, ecstasy, heroin, meth, gunpowder, ammunition, and he's been exposed to fentanyl. This is how Vader searches for drugs.
Communication.
That's it.
They're not phone in.
I have plans.
Okay.
But yeah, that's how he alerts me. And then I hid methamphetamine in that box. So he's great at our drug, obviously the warrants that we do are not that clean, but Vader's trained to avoid the animals, the food on the floor, all the garbage, and he's just fixated on the one task. And he's had great success doing that. Some highlights, we had a home invasion on East Street. A guy got shot in the face with a pellet gun. Vader actually found the suspect's sweater in the hiding container. January 22nd, Vader found 130 grams of cocaine in a satchel on the floor. And the interesting thing with that was the floor was covered in about 20 different takeout boxes and bags, but Vader didn't worry about the Big Mac and the chicken McNuggets. He went right to the satchel and didn't get it on it. Also in January, he found 111 grams of, it was cocaine, and it was in a book, but it was hollowed out to have a hidden point. So officers would have had to take every book off the shelf where Vader found that in 10 seconds. That, so that's usually the one incident that we talked about earlier. That's a guy who broke in to the business on Churchill, and Vader found him in a wooded area in between Bowland Road and the solar farm, and we would have never found him. Even with a drone, we would have never found him. And the only reason I knew he was there is because if I didn't have a hold of these, Vader would have ran up to him and fed him. But Vader went crazy and we found him. So Vader, I've been told, is ahead of his time. He's doing things that a year-old police dog should be doing. So his first find was in September. One individual ran from the police and Vader found him hiding underneath the canoe. Again in September, we had a break-in at a Blue Water Hydro. Vader found him a couple lots over hiding in the bush. February, suspect fled from a vehicle with stolen property, and Vader actually tracked right to the back door of the drug house he ran to, and the guy was in a vehicle getting ready to flee the scene. And then in March, we had this break-in. So Vader's found, he's tracked down 4 people, but like I said, there's more than that. There's the ones going through the woods where people just come out. And the fact that Vader shows up is just a deterrent to criminals, and people give up very quickly. One of the things I want to say is the threshold to use Vader, like to send him after a criminal, is very low. So it's not the greatest picture, but on the use of force model, it's active resistance. So if you look at Taser, for example, it's in the assaultive range. Your firearm is up here. Vader is very low. So as long as an individual committed a hybrid offense and he's actively resisting, such as running away or actively concealing, hiding under something, Vader can be deployed. So far, he hasn't actually bitten any suspects. He hasn't bitten anybody actually, but as we all want him to, and Vader too. He's chomping. Pardon the pun, but he's chomping at the bit. Another thing Vader can do when we have these these big containment calls, Vader and I are always on the containment. So if the individual tries to break containment, he's not going very far. So imagine a tactical officer wearing 40 pounds of equipment running after that guy, whereas Vader can do it in seconds. Yeah, and he does the high risk building searches. That's Vader on the right response team. And I'd almost say, like, on the left there, you have officers pointing their firearms, and then you have a bunch of fur with teeth and barking. That's more of a deterrent than anything. Because like I said, the threshold to use Vader is very, very low. Again, here's another deployment. When we do high risk takedown. They're not getting too familiar.
So does Vader simply just knock them over and keep them in one place? Is that what
So
he does?
Vader's trained to bite. So when he bites that person, he hits him as hard as he can, and he does not let go until I tell him to. He's a 90-pound dog. Just the force he's taking people down, they're gonna hit the ground.
Would they likely be injured in that case, or?
Sure, it won't be from the dog bite. So Vader is gonna puncture the skin, obviously, possibly a stitch or two, which does not fit the SIU Band-Aid. Obviously, the taping to the ground portion of it, you never know. But the injury will not be from the dog. It'll be secondary from.
Come on out, man. You're under arrest. Come on over. Put your hands up. You're under
We
arrest.
get this all the time where.
It's all gonna be good. Come on out.
But does, and you just close the gap.
Push your hands. Keep your hands up.
So the other thing, like Vader's done a lot of work with the first response team. And one of the things that they're impressed with is one, how quiet he can be, but two, when he does take down a suspect, he is only on the suspect. The other cops can come in, handcuff him, then I take Vader off, and the officers don't have to worry about Vader coming off the suspect and fighting. So.
Sean, can you speak to his week off?
Yes, so
Just gonna ask.
Vader, because of the situation Vader's put in. We had an incident where he cut his paw on during a building search and it required 6 stitches. So Vader was on doggy WSIB for about 7 to 8 days. That meant we had no dog to use. We were gonna rely on the Chatham Police Service if we needed a dog, simply because they're part of the same program that Vader is, and they would give us the same level of canine expectations that we're currently used to have. There's also been times where I have taken a couple vacations and Vader's not available to the service. So although I'm on call every day, there's been times where we haven't been able to use Vader.
To the chair, what happens to Vader when you do take vacation, as you should?
So I take him, there's 2 options for him. The first one, there's a kennel in London that specifically has a facility for police dogs. And what I need from a kennel is that it's 100% hands off. So Vader's isolated in a kennel. He gets let out 3 times a day by a trap door, lured back in with food, and there's nothing hands on. The other option is Windsor, where I train. They have a facility on the training area because they have 5 officers. There's always someone that watch the dogs. I can't leave them there. So it just flew away from me.
Board Member Roberts?
Because of what he has to do, what's the risk of fentanyl being on the floor of a
So before I send them into a drug house, I clear the area myself. So if I see a coffee table full of white residue, I leave them away from that. Worst case, so if there's a lot of powder around on tables and whatnot, I don't send it into those rooms. Worst case scenario, if he does ingest fentanyl, he's like everybody else, and I carry an Narcan and I deploy it just like a human. Yeah, it gets the Narcan in his nose, and he should be fine. But I try to keep away from all the white powdery substances.
I think if I can, Chair, just circle back, Sean talked about Vader being a deterrent. And just to tie it back to the use of force report, we talked about de-escalation. It is probably the most effective de-escalation tool that we have. So we can transition between use of force options, be verbal to talk people down, but the presence of Vader is our biggest asset in the de-escalation. So it tries to be everywhere that he can. So, and just to reiterate, the reliance on the dog that's happened within our organization now. I don't know if you saw during our meeting there, I had a conversation with Sean and he had to go out because the officers are out to conduct a building search and we default now to the dog. So everybody is very reliant on the tool that we have. And it is extremely effective. And I can just reiterate what Sean said about doing building searches in the past. The anxiety that officers feel when they're looking around a corner, when they're about to break the threshold of a place unknown what's inside, whether we know somebody's in there or we're looking for somebody. We're humans, we spook, but the dog doesn't. And so we are becoming heavily reliant on Vader and Sean and the capabilities that they have. And just even to the point where he's being called out at all hours and being utilized all the time.
And the one thing I want to mention too is prior to this canine handler job, I was on the emergency response team for 19 years, which meant I was the back off or the cover officer for the other canine units that came into the city for the past 2 decades. And I personally have experienced way more success in my first 7 months with Vader than I had for 19 years with the other services. And I think it just goes to show the quality of training that Vader and I get and how he operates compared to other units. So the Windsor Police Service is known as the best in the province, and they've trained us awesomely. Like the success I've had already is beyond what I thought. And Vader's at his worst right now. So he's going to excel at himself.
So the commitment that you make to this is intense.
Yes.
The commitment your family makes is intense. How are they doing with it?
One thing the analytics does not show is that there's been 4 dinners with my wife on date night that required takeout boxes before we were done. So far, so good.
That's like that. It's a huge commitment on their behalf.
My wife is extremely accepting of all this, and I think she likes Vader more than me sometimes. But it's going well.
I asked Sean a few months ago, just like concern for the person,
Right.
to your point. And he says without a shadow of a doubt that this is the best job that he's ever had. Like he is, for an officer who has 25 years of service to just, I would say peaking in his career is incredible.
And at Vader's swearing-in ceremony, I did thank your wife personally for her commitment to this as well. So, and she was 100% on board. It's just nice to see that it's not just like it's truly a family affair. So, thank you.
We've got comments from board member Sebastian and then board member Roberts.
No, thank you. I wanted to echo just the acknowledgement of your sacrifice and dedication and commitment to the program. Where do you see the future of the K9 program heading in the police service for Sarnia?
Ideally, more dogs would be extremely valuable. It would give us 24/7 coverage. It would make my life a little easier, but also for the service. The more, we've only been 7 months and the officers have already seen what Vader can do, and we're going to be deployed more and more often. One of the worst things that can happen to Vader is exhaustion. We don't want to burn him too fast. But ideally, if we get 4 dogs, it would be beneficial for the service. It and have a dog all the time. And one of the things, one of the differences is too, is when we, for example, when we use the OPP, there's a process. We have to use their officers. And when it comes to tracking consent orders, time is of the essence. So out of the 4 people that Vader's tracked down, from the time I was, called off my couch or out of my bed to the time if we had 24/7 coverage and always had a dog available, the success rate would be even more because I'm not getting out of bed. It's already happened. So that would be great.
Board Member Roberts.
Just for the public, we spent money on this dog in your training. So he is covering now the speed, less assaults on officers or their risk for time off and losing an officer. Like, to go down the list of how much this dog is covering that is actually saving us money. Can you give me a list? Just try, like, of everything, everything that he is covering, like time to catch someone, the improved.
The searching alone, he does the work of 10 officers when he searches a school, a field, anything like that, a house. He stops suspects in their tracks because they don't stand a chance. That's officers not having to look for them, further investigations, all that sort of thing. The list is endless. He does the work of several officers, I'd say.
So it'd be impossible to put the price on how much money and safety he has brought to the service.
Absolutely.
Just so the public recognizes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to elaborate on the one point there, where if we don't catch the suspect, the investigation continues, and then we're investing the man hours. So it's the unrealized savings that we would never know. We could hypothetically say that, well, we could have worked on that investigation for 6 months trying to figure out who that person was that is the shadowy figure in the video. But by virtue of him solving it within 25 minutes, we can get everything else done that day, as opposed to it becoming somebody's problem, like an investigator in Ron's team, or anywhere else within the organization. So the value adds that perspective, which we, to your point, we will never be able to quantify.
And that's the information we need. So when we look at another dog, the community can be rest assured it is an investment long term.
Okay, thank you. And Board Member Gillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the return on that investment has really proven to be much more than personally I expected. The way that the community has embraced Vader just helps us with our community policing again, to try to get to people to be more aware of the police service, but also the fact that the police service is not your enemy. The police service is there to help you. Coming back to the chief's comments earlier, we are an emergency service, and service is the key. And just the dynamic and the efficiencies of what Vader can do with its physical presence, and as was already alluded to, his speed. He can go where no man can go. So not to make him a super dog, but he is capable of doing so much more than just we as individuals can do. So I think he's an absolute great asset to not only Vader, but obviously his trainer and his companion and his soulmate. I mean, they're one and the same. So it's such a wonderful addition to the police service, such a broader context of where we are. And yeah, it was a very, very good move. And I have another comment though, Mr. Chair, I'm afraid I have to leave. My duties that brought me here are calling me. So I have to go. But I just wanted to just wanted to reiterate what a super job the how the community has embraced Vader and how the police service has embraced Vader. It's been wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Gillis, and all the best today. Thank you, Constable Irvin. Fantastic presentation. And yes, very, very exciting to see the work being done. Okay, that brings us to the open forum. I'll just look to the board if there's any items that they want to raise. Okay, seeing none, then in our closed meeting today, we'll be dealing with HR matters and labor negotiations. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn to closed session. Board Member Ash, Board Member McRoberts, all those in favor? Okay, we're adjourned. We'll take, we'll reconvene at about 10:30. Thank you.